Okay, ladies and gents, welcome back to part 7 of the RC Banjo build, which was taken from a free plan out of the RC M&E magazine a couple of months ago. If you watched the previous video, part 6, you will have seen that we've already cut out formers F1, F2 and F3 and assemble those. We've also cut out the stiffeners or the doublers that are used to stiffen the sides of the fuselage. Today I want to go through with you how I went about gluing these parts onto the fuselage sides, and also I want to go through a little bit about the motor that we've selected for the project, which is slightly different to the one that was in the plan, and how we've modified the front end to cope with that. So if I turn the camera around now, you'll be able to see exactly what I've been up to. And here we go. You can see the fuselage at the rear here has now been assembled with former F2 and former F3. They've been glued into position, and also the infill doublers that give the thickness to the sides and the sort of rigidity to the fuselage. They've been glued into position. The most important part to remember when you're at this stage is to actually glue these formers at 90 degrees to the fuselage sides. They must be absolutely square. The reason for this is when you flip it over onto the other side, the left hand side there, and glue it in position, obviously if these aren't at 90 degrees, it's all going to throw the fuselage out of square. So if I just offer up my engineer's square to the sides, you can see how I've got that. That's all nice and square, the same with the former 3. The glue's now dried on that, so we're actually ready to glue the 2 formers into the pre-marked positions on the other side of the fuselage. One thing to just bear in mind, and just to note as well, when you glue these infill doublers to the fuselage sides, when it dries, it actually tends to warp the sides. It'll tend to bow it slightly, like so, as it dries. It's no big deal, and we can get away with that by taping or pinning your fuselage side down to your flat work surface there, which I've done at both ends. Yeah, I'm now holding the back end, the front end of the fuselage down with this weight, and also with a bottle of methylated spirits at the other end to hold that down. If I take the blocks off, you will see it actually spring up where it has curled slightly. Like I say, don't worry about that at this stage. So the next part we've got to do is to glue the formers into the pre-marked positions on the other side, and this is where it gets a little more interesting. So we're going to use our aliphatic resin. Well, I am. You could use cyano for this, depending on what glue, or any sort of glue, epoxy if that's what you've got. But I'll be using the aliphatic resin. It gives me just a little bit of time to align the parts up before it dries, as it takes an hour or so for it to go off. If I flip the 2 parts over, the 2 fuselage sides over into the position that it's going to go, which is sort of like this, if I just align that up and press it down, just press it down, that'll do, just to show you. It's important now that these are nice and square. If you look down there, that's pretty damn good. That's as good as we're going to get. So we know the 2 sides are square. We can also double check by going to the end of the model and just putting the square up against the end there, and as you can see, that's pretty good. Also, we can go to the back, just dab on there, and we can see that is pretty good also. So I'm quite pleased that that's going to go back into the right place. Once we've got that in position, then we can actually glue the side doublers into position, which I've already cut. There's one there, there's one going to go there like so, and also at the back end there's this part 2 that I've already pre-cut. That is going to go onto there. So that is going to be your basic box fuselage. Now, if you remember, I said at the start of the video that we're going to take a look at the motor, which is here. This is the motor that I've bought. It's a Tornado Thumper 3536/05. Now, I must admit, I'm not an electric guru, to say the least. Most of my models are nitro and petrol, so I'm not really into the whats and wherefores of an electric motor. But I've been told by my good friend Andy Cross of the Chase Radio Control Aero Club, this is the motor that I need for this model, and it will produce approximately 400 watts of power, which is like the top end of the scale, if you like, that this model requires according to the plan. So it should be quite lively. It only costs $23.75, so it's a pretty good price. A couple of quid for the prop. And we're going to run that through a 40 amp ESC. If you do the calculations, you'll find that you could possibly get away with a 30 amp ESC, but for belt and braces purposes, I'm going to go for a 40, and that can also be used in other models at a later date, such I crash this one, etc. I've also cut out a new F1 former and pre-drilled the 4 holes for the bracket that holds the motor on. The middle hole is obviously to give clearance of the shaft, and the top hole is to poke the wiring through. If you look at the drawing, because the motor is a different size to the one that is drawn, if I can zoom in, there's the side view. This is showing the original F1 position for the motor drawn, that's in dotted there. What I've done is I've offered my new motor up to it, and that's where it's going to go. And what I've done is I've redrawn the position of the F1 there in a crosshatch line. So I've moved it back approximately 16 millimeters from the original. Obviously, the important thing when you're doing something like that is to maintain the angle of the original. So keep everything parallel with the original. That's what I'm saying. I then transferred those sizes onto the plan view, and you can see the new firewall there, and also, you know, 16 mil back from the original, running parallel. It doesn't show too good up on the camera, but it is sort of parallel, and that's where the motor's going to go in there, as you can see. So slight bit of difference, but it shouldn't make any difference to the overall performance of the model. So that's about it for this video. Hope you've enjoyed it so far. If you have, please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel and get updates on the further development of the flying banjo.